Greetings all, and welcome to the 23rd episode of the V.T.P, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that is sort of glossed over in many cases, but has intense ramifications for how the world of Pokemon operates and how a balance is kept to maintain the world in as peaceful of a state as possible. Today, we are going to be looking into the topic of legendary and mythical Pokemon, and how they are defined, operate, shape the world around them, and as a whole, how humanity's interactions with them could and have changed the world both in-universe and real.
In order to make this conversation possible, however, we must define what exactly a legendary or mythical Pokemon is, and that alone is not exactly the easiest of feats. As far as I am concerned, though, we can break these creatures up into three major groups. First, there are minor legendaries, and these include Pokemon that are extremely rare and powerful, but also exist in multiple copies across the globe. This includes beasts such as the legendary birds, the Regis, and so on. Though they are extremely rare and strong, they do exist as multiples and thus are the most accessible of them all. In fact, they even include powerful beasts like Ho-Oh and Lugia, since there are multiple of them across the globe. Secondly, there are deity-class legendaries. For this group in any given universe, there is only one of them in existence because they represent the natural forces of the world that we call home, and even the entire universe. The mere presence of these creatures shapes the universe as we know it, and commands the forces of nature in all aspects, and thus their power is not only immense, but literally world-changing in this sense. And finally, there are mythical Pokemon, who do exist in multiples just like minor legendaries, but are so incredibly hard to find and see that, despite the fact that we do know they exist, they are treated by some as the opposite. In other words, they are so rare that most can go their entire lifetimes without ever seeing or even perhaps hearing about these creatures, making them nearly impossible to find and properly study in some cases.
Now that this has been established, in order to really sink into just what kind of power these creatures have and represent, let's go all the way back to the very beginning of it all. And by that, I don't mean the franchise, but the true history of the Pokemon world.
While newcomers might find it a bit odd, as fans are aware of, it was actually a Pokemon that supposedly created the universe, Arceus. Born from an egg that existed before the universe in Sinnoh legend, it is said that Arceus used its 1,000 arms, heavily implied these days to be the unknown, to create and shape the universe, and through this action, created three beings that represented the most primal aspects of the universe. Dialga, the embodiment of time, Palkia, the embodiment of space, and Giratina, the embodiment of... well, oddly enough, that one we're not entirely sure. The official explanation is that Giratina is supposed to represent antimatter, but scientifically that just makes no sense, so the best that I can say is that it's some sort of odd exotic matter with anti-gravitational properties, and leave it at that.
Regardless, this makes sense in practice, as all three of these beasts have been observed and possess powers that match this legend. So even in ancient times, people recognized the sort of power they actually had.
This means that at the most fundamental level, the reality of the Pokemon world is entirely dependent upon their existence. A world of Pokemon cannot exist without gods that are themselves Pokemon, and this goes far beyond just what beasts lay beyond the scope of our planet. Earth has its fair share of guardians as well, that are just as powerful as these beasts, and just as important to life as we know it. The Lake Guardians, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, gave life on Earth the power to show and maintain knowledge, emotions, and willpower, respectively. The Wither Trio gave rise to the sea, land, and sky. The Aura Trio exists as living embodiments of life, destruction, and order, and so on and so forth. This is all important to recognize because it shows a unique attribute to the natural world that is lacking in the real world. For humanity, the state of the natural world is at our discretion, which has allowed us to damage our planet, possibly irreversibly at this point in human history. But in the world of Pokemon, it is nature that truly holds all the power, as these beasts, though not immortal or impossible to defeat, wield such power that they could erase all of us if needed, showing a unique dynamic regarding who truly holds any power in the Pokemon universe.
On that note though, I will admit that to any person new to the franchise, It might seem a bit far-fetched to think that, even with its fantastical setting, that anything living or not could ever hope to have this kind of power realistically. So how exactly do their powers shape the world around them? Let's look at a few examples to give an idea.
A classic example is the weather trio of Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza. Now, it is said in Hoenn legend that Kyogre is the beast that gave birth to the oceans, and Groudon the land, and from a realistic perspective, this doesn't make a lot of sense to some, and even to me, I will admit that it is unlikely that these beasts are the true originators of these aspects of our planet. However, there is something to be said to what they can do, as they are both extremely ancient and the natural abilities, especially in their primal forms, more than have the power to change the globe related to those aspects. Primal Kyogre's Primordial Sea ability has the power to create deluges of such volume that they could readily bury the land of the world and turn our planet into a water world, while Primal Groudon's Desolate Land ability can allow it to intensify the effects of sunlight and warm the planet enough to cause large portions of the oceans to evaporate if left uncontrolled. They might not be guaranteed originators of the sea and land, but they can cause incredibly catastrophic damage if their powers are left unchecked. In this sense, Rayquaza is the ruler of the sky that lays above them, and is thus above them in status, but at the same time, does not wish for the two to destroy the world as the atmosphere can change if the rest of the planet does, giving it an incentive to protect its habitat and calm these raging beasts when they run amok. The same can be said with the Aura trio of the Kalos region. Xerneas, the embodiment of life, has the capacity to use fairy-type power to accelerate the growth of life around it. Its counterpart, Yveltal, is the opposite in that it saps life from the world around it to cause death and destruction. Though Yveltal seems to be an evil force, in truth, too much life can lead to the depletion of resources and issues with the longevity of life through generations, so the two are needed in tandem. Zygarde, in turn, acts as the embodiment of order with the two, using its power to keep a balance between them and at the same time protect the world against anything that dares to harm and destroy this balance. These are beasts, to be sure, but they still keep the world in one piece and are meant to operate as a trio, with no one member meant to be greater than the rest unless disorder must be eliminated.
With this said, however, it is important to note that the way in which these creatures shape the world around them is not something that can be entirely understood in every case, and this is primarily because the two issues that come with trying to understand these beasts scientifically, which may or not add to their mystique and status, depending upon which camp you lay in.
On the one hand, while some aspects of their anatomy and powers are scientifically understood to some degree or another, it is not always known how exactly their incredible power actually works, because it is hard to conduct scientific analyses on their forms on account of their extreme rarity. Sure, we might have some idea of how some beasts like Rayquaza or Kyurem work biologically, but that is only because there have been many open opportunities to actually study them. We know where they are, and thus can conduct research on them, but this is not the case for most, especially in the case of mythical Pokémon, hence why they have their own special category. As such, some of them are a bit frustrating to try and understand, and that could be a serious problem for gauging how to really handle them if they get involved in a combat situation. On the other hand, on a more obvious note, understanding them scientifically is a pain, because they can often be flat-out dangerous to even be around. Trying to understand the power of a beast like Palkia is kind of a problem when its mere presence can warp space and even destroy the space around it. So, goodbye scientific instruments and likely anything living around it. This has proven to be a serious issue in many cases, as limited knowledge on just how powerful they really are can lead to some serious issues for humans that wish to harness their power. And that is a problem that is more than apparent for those that know the Pokemon franchise well.
One of the core aspects of many major entry into this series is that there is some sort of villainous organization that is trying to take over some aspect of the world, with the original Team Rocket being the only massive exception to this rule. Starting in Generation 3, we see these criminal organizations trying to control the power of major deity-class legendaries, and even some minor legendaries in a few cases, in order to shape the world as they see fit.
Teams Aqua and Magma for Kyogre and Groudon respectively, Team Galactic and Dialga and Palkia, Team Plasma and Reshiram and Zekrom, and so on. While the existence of these sorts of groups might seem a bit odd and not realistic to some, In truth, they are about as real as it gets. In the real world, we have organizations and companies that look to harness the natural resources of our world for their own gain, and for the longest time, coal was a great example of this. It was used and abused by those that found favor with it as a fuel source across the globe, despite the now apparent damage that excessive burning of such a material brought with it in the long term. Nuclear power is another great example. A great way to generate energy, but also something that could be weaponized and has catastrophic consequences if left unchecked and uncontrolled. In the world of Pokemon, legendary beasts of any sort are sought after because they can do all of this and more, and effectively at the flip of a switch, per se, making them just a more intense interpretation of this change that humans have and seek to inflict upon their society and the world as a whole. As a counter to that though, it is also noted that in most cases, those that take the time and put forth the ambition to use these beasts to their own gain do so with a note of relation and compassion, that what they are doing because they think a better world will come of it. While in the real world, greed seems to be the dominant factor, making them more akin to Team Rocket than anything else. It is an interesting juxtaposition, but in either case, real or not, the attempted and even sometimes successful exploitation of these beasts is a common act and makes humanity a dangerous force to be reckoned with when the power of the natural world is taken into our grasp and used for reasons that may only be beneficial to some and not all. On that note then, we are brought to another question as to play a character in many of these games. We are tasked with stopping these evil organizations, but in nearly all cases, once they are defeated, or even before they are defeated, we are given the chance to capture these legendary beasts and use them as we see fit. The question then becomes whether or not such an action is in fact a wise one.
In capturing these beasts, do we also show a desire to make the same happen, for the world to suffer in some way because of our actions? Well, to me, the answer is both yes and no.
In some cases, like the Creation Trio, just because they are captured, it does not mean that the world is instantly thrown into danger. As embodiments of the forces that created the universe will keep right on going so long as they are alive, and given that they are guaranteed to outlive anyone that dares to try and capture them, it's all good, especially if the person that has obtained them is just there to try and help them. However, as we also know, they make for great partners in battle because of their extraordinary powers, so for many, their power can still be used and even misused, though hopefully for purposes that will not jeopardize the safety of the world. On a moral level, this may not put us that much farther away from these evil organizations, so who is really the hero here? Well, obviously it's still us, the player character, but it is something to make note of. And in other cases, like someone capturing a beast like Zygarde, if it is contained within the possession of a trainer, will it still be able to do its job and save the world and restore balance as it intends to if it is still under the control of a human? The implication here is that we can be the masters of the natural world, but as in reality, this has the potential to doom the rest of the world if that power is not handled properly. And looking at human history, yeah, not exactly a strong suit of the human race in practice.
So what exactly does this mean for the average person? Does this mean that we need to invest great amounts of resources and labor in order to protect these creatures? Does this mean that every single person needs to be afraid of some sort of disaster happening related to them that will seriously impact their lives? Well, no, not really, and that's sort of the beauty of how legendary and even mythical Pokemon are really handled in the franchise.
Of the Pokemon that can cause cataclysms, their appearances are so scarce that they are often revered as legends for a reason, as they are not a constant part of the lives of the majority of humans. We go about our daily lives as we do, and while they might be present somewhere, silently acting as manifestations of the world around us, they do not seem to show incredible concern for our existence in a lot of cases. Sure, a scant few groups and individuals have come into their radar and are massively impacted by their presence as a result, but for most people, this just isn't a concern. That does not mean that we should simply ignore their existence, of course, but it does mean that we do not need to spend every waking hour worshipping or cowering in fear at them. Aside from the few that try to take control of their power, legendary and mythical Pokemon of all sorts coexist with humans, either directly or, as is the case for almost all, with indifference. We are a relative newcomer on the planet in the history of life, So while we might be more of an irritant or presence than other species in this regard, we are rarely the subject of attack by these creatures, and in turn are little more than blips on their radar. In this same fashion, while there might be laws that can help limit interactions between them and humans for the sake of safety for all, they really don't necessarily need to be protected as much as it may seem. Though yes, we have at times managed to get their power under our control, in the end, these ambitions and plans either fail due to interactions from good people that act to keep these Pokemon from being used for dark intentions, or in some way the beasts they are trying to control prove to be too much for them and they are forced into the mercy of their supposed captives, of which there is usually little to go around.
As such, despite all the power that these creatures have and what it could do in the wrong hands, well, we don't want to just sit on our laurels. We can also breathe a tiny sigh of relief. They will likely continue to do what they have always done for as long as they have lived, and we can be assured that whatever may happen, the universe and our world will correct it in time, and nothing is going to be lost forever.
Legendary and mythical Pokemon as a whole are truly magnificent creatures that can more than prove to be a force to be wary of when they are allowed to make the most of their power, and we are often intertwined with them whether we like it or not. Humanity's attempts to use their power might not make it seem like we have any right to commune with them, but we all share a universe together, and through them, life is not only possible, but exists as a testament to how little we compare to them, and how they will likely continue to exist long after our own species has vanished from this world. Regardless, how we choose to treat them will ultimately decide the fate of the future in some fashion or another, so let us make sure that we do our duty to keep the peace between ourselves and these creatures, or, in life and art imitating each other, we may face a cataclysm born of human ignorance or indifference that could leave little trace of us and our history behind for the future to examine.
That's all for now, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next episode of the V.T.P. Thank you all for watching this video. It is always a pleasure to help teach others about the world of Pokemon and the many facets of it that exist in both the world we call home and the world they call home. If you'd like, please leave a comment and subscribe and ring the bell to this channel to get regular updates on content and anything else that might be going on. You can find me and my written work on DeviantArt under the name Titus, and be informed of information and content uploads on my Twitter page and my Patreon page. Donations are always welcome. Always remember, the world of Pokemon is a vast and varied place, and there's no telling what secrets might be hiding just around the corner. So keep watch, stay vigilant, and always prepare for the unexpected. Until next time, have a wonderful rest of the day.